Hello there. So I'm thinking about taking a Sunday drive in my gas guzzling car. With the problem of climate change, do you think it's my moral obligation to not take this drive? Well, if you said so, Walter Synod Armstrong is against your position. He's going to use various principles to explain that individuals do not have a moral obligation to take a Sunday drive. Let's see why. Before we get into the various principles of philosophy which Armstrong is going to address, we're going to point out that the point of Armstrong's argument is not if climate change is real or it's not real. The point is that if climate change is real for some of those who are non-believers, why is this important? That we understand if we have moral obligation to take a gas guzzling drive. First of all, global warming has begun and is likely to increase in the next century. According to NASA, the Earth's temperature has increased 2 degrees Fahrenheit since the late 19th century, and most of this happened in the past 35 years. According to Armstrong, global warming will cause numerous problems for a great number of people through climate change and extreme weather, flood, droughts. Also, the people who are going to hurt the most are the poor, because the government, the big government in Western world, know how to adapt to these problems. And also, another problem is that global warming cannot be stopped. It can only be reduced. And lastly, global warming has been caused mainly by human activities. So, Armstrong points out that when we decide if we want to take this Sunday drive, do we have a moral obligation to think about all the stats, or do we just take the drive out of pleasure? Let's explore the various principles. The harm principle states that we have a moral obligation to not cause harm to someone. But Armstrong does argue that if I decide to drive this car for pleasure, how does my fun affect someone if they are not inhaling all the gases? So now we've established that the harm principle does not work. What if a lot of people look up to me and I decide to take my gas guzzling car on a drive every single Sunday? Will people follow me? So we go into the indirect harm principle. Indirect harm principle states that we have a moral obligation to prevent other people from doing something that's wrong because we do it. The indirect harm principle still does not show that I have a moral obligation not to drive because other people follow me. Because climate change happens on such a big scale that we, even with the help of my friends, cannot change it. We go into the contribution principle, which says that we have the moral obligation not to make problems worse. The contribution principle still does not make me not want to drive my gas guzzling car. Because even if I don't take this drive today, global warming will still be the same. It's not going to change, it's not going to get any less, or it's not going to get any more. I'm too insignificant to make a change. So we're going to go into the problem of the gas principle. The gas principle states that we have a moral obligation not to expel these harmful gases into the air. So since the gas principle states that we shouldn't put bad gases into the air, does that mean boiling water is bad? Or breathing out is bad? Because I'm going to expel carbon dioxide into the air. Armstrong argues that maybe it's not the gas principle, maybe it's the risk factor, which says that we should not put people at risk, even if it's not going to hurt them. The risk principle, there's no way to actually identify someone that's going to suffer from my wasteful driving. So the risk principle does not clearly apply in my moral obligation to reduce climate change. None of these principles actually give me a reason not to go on my drive. So we're going to look inwards. Kant's claim is that the moral status of acts depend on the agent's maxims or intentions. So therefore, we're going to look into the universalizability principle, which states that we have a moral obligation not to act on our maxims, which also means intentions. So it states that if my intention is to cause harm to people with this act, then I shouldn't do it. But if I'm driving, my goal is just to go on a harmless, fun drive for pleasure. And if I do go on this drive, whether it causes harm or it doesn't cause harm, my goal will still be established or will still be achieved. Therefore, this principle has been ruled out. So we look at the means principle, which states that we have another moral obligation not to use anyone as a means to get our goal, which technically I'm not really using anyone to get my goal if I'm still happy driving this gas guzzling car, even if it doesn't harm anyone. from the means principle, we move to the doctrine of double effect, which states that we have a moral obligation not to create harm to someone intentionally. But if I take this my Sunday drive, I'm technically not harming anyone because we still talked about a harm principle, and I have no intention of harming anyone. And I will be perfectly satisfied if suddenly the car decides to go off no greenhouse gases and no global warming occurred. But Armstrong does also note that maybe we shouldn't be looking at the individuals, maybe we should be looking at the institutions, if the government should actually protect the people from global warming. So we're going to move into the ideal law principle, which states that the government ought to make things that are illegal or that cause harm illegal. The first problem would be they're going to restrict freedom. If the government should take away the freedom to go on a beautiful Sunday drive, a lot of people would get angry. So the way for them to do it would be to tax gases and to make it extremely expensive to form a habit of taking the drive. But maybe we all have a moral obligation to try to increase these taxes. But until the taxes are increased, individuals have no moral obligation to abide by this ideal tax laws, so we can still go on our gas guzzling trip. So Armstrong concludes that there's no defensible principle that proves that individuals have a moral obligation to refrain from the Sunday drive. Although this isn't to say that it's not morally ideal or morally better not to take these drives. The fundamental point of Armstrong throughout this whole thing is that individuals do not have a significant impact to actually curb climate change, but the government has a bigger impact in this problem. So instead of environmentalists focusing on people who actually take the Sunday drives, they should spend their Sunday actually working on laws to help government make it illegal to take the Sunday drives. That would be more efficient than not taking the drive.